Welcome into the Atlanta football party. I'm Jarvis Davis. Coming up on today's show, it was a big old party in Indy.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta football party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta football party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste, and joining me today are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And of course, our Atlanta football party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, guys, the 2024 NFL Combine is a wrap, and we have thoughts. So let's get into it with the top three with JD, Free, and Tori. And Aaron, we're going to start with you because my brother, I kind of feel your pain because I had FOMO for all the people that were in Vegas for the new edition residency. It appears you have FOMO too.
Yeah. I haven't been able to make my way to the Combine, but watching Jarvis and Tori be there this year, I definitely had that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And I think I'll make an effort to try to get there in 2025. So I do not, sit there, watching it all on TV as it unfolds. I definitely enjoy that. But being in the building and maybe seeing some of that stuff, especially with, Xavier Worthy, sort of breaking the record. That was a great moment on television. I couldn't imagine what that moment would have been like being in the building.
Indeed. So when you took a look at it at TV, and by the way, just so everybody knows, I have FOMO for Indy too, but I've already claimed that we're going to be in Indy next year. So expect this quartet to be in the building next year. But Aaron, when you think about, like you mentioned, the Xavier Worthy moment, but what was maybe another moment where it just did it for you? You're like, yeah, that right there, especially as someone who follows the Falcons so closely, and this person or that person impressed you.
Well, I talked about this on Locked On Falcons the other day, but speed
Falcons podcast, by the way, guys.
is what I'm looking for at the wide receiver position, and this was a especially fast group of wide receivers. I think they broke the record for the number of wide receivers that had sub 4.4 speed. A bunch of those guys were Senior Bowl guys, and we know the Falcons love some Senior Bowl guys. So I think the overlap of speed, again, speaking of Xavier Worthy, but that sort of position, I think this is a great year for the Falcons to really, maybe even double and triple dip at that wide receiver position to add some speed that was really missing from the team last year.
I think that's such a great call, Free, because when you look at the first round and second round picks, especially the first round, obviously, the hope I think is for all of us is either if you're going to go QB in the draft, and of course you guys are going to play GM and go in the opposite direction in the next seg. But if you're going to go QB at that first round position, you really kind of want to go edge rusher if you get away with it second round, or vice versa, who knows? But I think the most important piece is the depth. Like, yeah, you have your three top wide receivers. I think we all kind of know, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Nichols. I should know because he's like Malik Neighbors, right in my backyard, right? But you've got those three that are kind of elite, but then you have a really nice, solid group of sort of that second batch of wide receivers that I think the Falcons could absolutely capitalize on. So yeah, I think that's a great call that they really kind of showed out and showed that there's depth enough there that the Falcons can make good at the wide receiver position. What about you, Jarvis? Newbie, inaugural Indy trip.
It was dope. It was so cool. And for all my people up in, they might not know what I mean when I say dope. I mean, it was a very cool experience. Yes. So I read a very,
and 2024, nobody knows that's what that. Well, okay, go ahead.
It could be a reference to other things, that are illegal. So you just gotta make sure I'm clear to you. But yeah, it was cool. It was a great experience. Like I was telling Aaron before we got started, like, yeah, it's a lot because it was a lot for me just covering the event. I can only imagine like what it was for a player, what it is for a player, because you think about like meetings and we're just overhearing like how teams are meeting with guys up until like almost midnight the night before, and then have to pop right back up and and be ready to do a press conference at 8 o'clock in the morning. All those things just makes you just look at it like, oh, wow, it's a lot of information. And you understand why the combine is such a big deal because of all the rumors going around and everybody having conversations, sidebar conversations at restaurants, and all that good stuff. So it's the nightlife also. So it's just so many aspects that goes on in Indy. It was just really cool to be in it. And it definitely kicked my behind because Friday I was in.
You were done?
Most exhausting week.
Yeah. And so, Jarvis, when you walked away that Friday, or really Saturday, I guess, once you kind of recover, you're back home and you're able to kind of woosah and be out of the bubble, who impressed you? Who did you say, like, man, it would be a good look if the Falcons took that guy or those guys?
Wow. So coming into, I have been redeemed, y'all. Y'all know how you live a certain type of lifestyle and you decide to change your ways. So for me, I've been on Dallas Turner. I've been on that Dallas Turner train. But when you go look at the numbers and everything like that, I felt like a scout. Like, okay, let me go back and look at the film. Let me go look at the tape and see what's going on. Woo, when you talking about edge rushers, Jared Verse, I'm love that you said vice versa. Jared Verse, oh my gosh. The dude is an absolute disruptor. So I totally get people, because Chop Robinson was starting to get a little buzz and everything. He ran the 4.4, obviously. So I was like, okay, let me go check out everybody. Let me check out all the guys who I feel like can go in the first round. And when I tell you Jared Verse is he's one.
That guy.
He's that guy. He's that guy. Then I'll put Latu right behind him. And I put Dallas Turner and Chop Robinson are pretty close, but with the edge going to Dallas Turner. But yeah, it's amazing, the amount of information when you get that stuff starts to come out as far as speed and numbers. And then you're like, okay, let me go back and double check and see and take a look at the film. And that's the part that I feel like is just, oh man, this is really, really, really cool. But yeah, I have changed my mind. I have changed my ways. I no longer want the Falcons to draft Dallas Turner. It is the Jared Verse for me. I need some bars. Let's get it.
You heard it right here at our Atlanta football party. Don't forget, mark the calendar. He said it on March 4th. And now to our veteran of Indianapolis, Tori. This is, you said, your fifth combine, I think, there?
Yeah, so I started going in 2018, and the only one I've missed since has been pandemic one. So feeling good. And as y'all can see, I don't have a voice, which is incredibly normal for me post-combine because you're talking so much, you're around so many people. It's late nights, early mornings. I mean, it's kind of what Jarvis said. It's a very, very exhausting week, but it's one that I always come out of the week with so much more information than I went into it with.
Cool.
And I think that's a great call, Tori, because everything before that is just on paper. And of course, what we saw players do in various games in the last season. But I think when you see it up close and personal, and then it's like X's to X's or apples to apples comparison, just like the comparisons Jarvis just mentioned, that makes it hit different. Yeah. And with you doing so much of that work kind of with AtlantaFalcons.com and with that organization overall, having to really deep dive, kind of who did you walk away saying, whoa, and maybe kind of piggybacking Tori off of Jarvis, here's what I thought when I went in, but here's kind of where I landed on my way out.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was honestly less about a singular person or a player and more about a theme. And so we had something different that we did this year that we haven't done in years past is we actually had a spot on Radio Row where national media could come by and we would do 10, 15-minute interviews with them. And that was really great for me also to kind of just gauge what other people are saying about the Falcons. And what I found was so interesting, and I actually wrote a column about it earlier today, is that there was a consensus about the quarterback position in Atlanta. And I'm surprised we've gone almost 10 minutes on this show and not talked about the quarterback.
I know, right? I'm impressed with us.
I'm shocked. But no, every single conversation I had came right back to the quarterback, as it should, because that is the linchpin of this organization where it is right now. And something that I thought was really, really interesting, and I have to give credit where credit is due, Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show, who's one of my good friends. I always enjoy talking to him because I think he brings such a great insight. And something that he said that really stuck with me that I almost fixated on was that the decision that the Falcons make in 2024 about the quarterback, whether it is free agency, trade, draft, it dictates how you look at them and their success in 2024 and how much patience you allow them as a fan base or as national media. And that was so interesting because almost every single person I talked to, whether it be national media or even kind of locally who like look at the Falcons or sub-regionally look at the Falcons, almost every single person talked about the Falcons getting a veteran quarterback. That was something that I was like, if you do not think that you can get up high enough to get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, then there's a significant drop from the top 2 or 3 in the rest of the class. So if you don't think you can get there, which you'd have to fork out quite a bit in order to get there, everything that everybody was saying was the best route for the Falcons right now is to go out and get a veteran, whether it be free agency or a trade. And the proverbial leader in the clubhouse of everybody that I talked to was Kirk Cousins, which was very intriguing to me. It really showed me how the outside perspective of this team is that people really do think that this team is a quarterback away from being a playoff contender.
Yeah, and I think that's huge because you would look on the defensive side of the ball, and you do need an edge rusher, don't get me wrong. But if you had to pick one player away, that's your player. And I can't say that I disagree with that because I don't, and again, definition of one player away from what, but I think we know what we mean here. One player away from contending, getting back to the postseason, making some noise in the postseason. That's very interesting. Taking kind of perfectly segues into our next seg, because when we come back, we'll take a stab at being a GM and being a GM for that QB position. Join us again when we go into the deep dive. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So if you made a quick bet on the Celtics, or you made it on Atlanta native Jaylen Brown, then it's a good look. You might want to do that again because they are racking up the wins and they are primed and ready to blow through the rest of this regular season. Live same-game parlays. Again, if you'd watched the game on Sunday between the Celtics and Warriors, that might have been a game you wanted to do a same-game parlay on. And, of course, exclusive props and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, guys, time to play a little GM. This is always the fun part because, hey, you can just dream, you could wish, you could do it however you want to. So, Jarvis, I think about what Tori just said, and it's interesting even more so because we're just saying, let's just assume for the sake of this exercise that the Falcons don't go QB in that first round of the draft, or to Tori's point, it becomes just a bridge that's too far to cross, getting from 8 to where you need to be to get the guy you want. Then let's talk about that veteran who you would like to make the case for, and the 4 veterans that have been most often rumored or connected to or tied to Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson. Now, I'm going to step back and let you be the GM. You can make the case for 1, 2, 3, 4, or none of them. I'm just going to step back, JD, and let you put your GM hat on and go.
Well, let me start off with who I don't want, because we've had several conversations about, Justin Fields on this program. So I'm starting off with who I don't want. I don't want Baker Mayfield because I think people are scared to call him exactly what he is, which is a journeyman quarterback. Dude has been on several teams. He was with the Browns, with the Panthers, he was with the Rams, and now he's with the Bucs. And the Bucs are kind of a middling team right now because they just re-signed Mike Evans to a 2-year deal, which is great. But, is that going to really get you back to a plan where you're working towards winning the championship? And I don't think they have, or a Super Bowl, rather. And I don't think they have the coach in place who they feel they can get them back to theirs. Because I feel like Todd Bowles is kind of just sticking around, doing well enough to stick around. And then we just know that that's not a recipe for a Super Bowl contender. So for a guy who went on a team that's meddling, and had a fine season, I'm not interested in that, because I want to put somebody in place that's going to get this team and be able to take them over the top, because we talked about being the quarterback away. I don't need an average quarterback coming in here, trying to get them there by barely making it, because they've already done that before. So, yeah, I'm good on Baker Mayfield. Cool.
So I like that part. We'll stop right there. Anybody else? We'll throw it out there like that. Tori, Free, either of you want to make the case for Baker Mayfield for Atlanta?
No, not really. I mean, like, for me, when we were emailing back and forth about this, I was like, okay, let me come up with like a one-word association for all these quarterbacks. And like, for me, the one with Baker Mayfield was swagger, but like that, I don't know if how much swagger wins you games. So like, for me, it's like, right. Baker's a fun human being, but I don't know if he's the right guy for Atlanta.
That's fair. How about you, Tori?
Yeah, I mean, my thing is too when it comes to the whole like Baker Mayfield conversation, the only thing that even kind of a little bit would like go the opposite way to give you like the other side of the coin is because he has worked with Zach Robinson before, and he was very adamant about enjoying the time that he had with Zach Robinson, even though it was a very, very short amount of time. But that is a relationship that I think Zach Robinson was very important to Baker Mayfield's short amount of time with the Rams and what they were able to do in that short amount of time. Because essentially, from what I've heard, is that Sean McVay essentially gave the reins of like Baker Mayfield and trying to learn this offense to Zach Robinson to try and get him to where he needed to go. So I'll just play devil's advocate here. This does not mean that I think that's the move that they should make. I think when I like look at this offense and what it could look like and what it could be and the options that are out there, I have a few others that are before that. So I personally like don't think that, but if I'm just playing devil's advocate, that would be the argument.
And it'll be very interesting, right? Because I feel like he falls into the veteran category, but I just because he'll give you flashes, right? He'll give you flashes, and he'll be accurate with the football, and he'll get on the roll and get you some wins. But I just feel like that's a makeup of a backup quarterback for me. But I think Kirk Cousins is very interesting, right? Because I'm not really a big Kirk Cousins fan. I feel like he puts up a lot of empty stats. But if the Falcons were considering bringing him in, I wouldn't be mad at it, because here's the thing. I look at it from this standpoint. If they bring in Kirk Cousins, who's a 36-year-old quarterback, he's coming off an Achilles injury, I feel like they would have to then draft a quarterback in this draft. If it's a matter of them trading back, getting some more assets, and taking a guy in the late first, like a Michael Penix, I feel like that'll be a good segue for a guy like that coming into the league. So if they do go with Cousins, because he puts up the numbers are there for sure. And I think that in this system and with another, like we talked about earlier, with the wide receiver position, being able to add to that, maybe even double and tripling up like Aaron mentioned earlier, I really feel like that'll probably set this offense up pretty well, at least for the immediate future.
Yeah, for me, looking at the other three guys that we talked about, again, going back to the little exercise I did for myself with the one-word association. With Kirk Cousins, the one word I was like consistency. For Justin Fields, it was upside. And for Russell Wilson, it was Sierra. That to me was the biggest asset that Russell was bringing to the table at this point in time in his career. But yeah, I think with Kirk, like, and it goes back to something that Tori just said with, it's going to tell you a lot about what the Falcons' vision is for this year and in the next few years, depending on, particularly with Kirk and Justin Fields, because I think those are the main two people that most people sort of think make the most sense for the Falcons. But like Kirk is going to give you sort of that consistency. Like Jarvis, I think Kirk is a good quarterback, but I don't know if he's a great quarterback. And I think if you're going after Kirk Cousins, I've heard someone else refer to it as this, like you're getting Alex Smith with the Chiefs before they got Patrick Mahomes. And so you're just trying to get that sort of stable sort of foundation for your offense to be a consistent and reliable playoff team for the next couple of years. But that you're not necessarily getting Kirk Cousins as the end game. And that's the difference between Justin Fields, which is Justin Fields, you probably have like a lower floor, but you maybe have a higher ceiling with him as the quarterback for the Falcons. And so that's going to kind of tell you, if the Falcons are more, okay, we're shooting for the moon here, but we know that, there's a decent chance that, Justin Fields is not going to necessarily work out in a year or two. So those are kind of, I think, the interesting questions that the Falcons will have to answer. And we'll probably get an answer pretty soon with like the league year starting in like 9 days, where, if they're going to go after any of these guys, they're going to have to, do so pretty early.
The thing is too, and something that we haven't talked about is like, who's the scheme fit too? Like that's a part of the conversation as well. It's like, who's going to fit well with what Zach Robinson ideally wants to do with this offense. But I'm going to give you all a peek behind the curtain really quick, because when we do these shows, we have a chat that we all use to like communicate to each other to get pacing along. And Tenitra said, okay, Tori, like after Aaron, like you go, we'll go, and then like y'all weigh in on Russ. And I don't think any of us want to do that. So
I noticed that was like weigh in on.
I think what gave it away, Tori? The Sierra reference, the one-word reference for Aaron gave it.
Here's the thing. I really do think, like from the outside looking in, and this is just my opinion, it's between Justin Fields and it's between Kirk Cousins, and everything else just kind of feels like smoke at this point. Yeah. And when the thing is, what I find so freaking interesting about all of this is that 3 years ago, we were having a conversation about a 36-year-old Matt Ryan. And now here we are 3 seasons later having a conversation about a 36-year-old Kirk Cousins. And it's like, how is that the 4-year arc of this organization? That's what's so mind-boggling to me is here we are talking about that kind of stuff. And go ahead, Tenitra.
No, agree with you, Tori. And here we are back talking about Justin Fields. I mean, it's an interesting arc that we have all the way around on so many levels.
100%, because that was at the exact same time that it's like, oh, draft Justin Fields and he can learn behind Matt Ryan. And, this is the same conversation that we've essentially had back in like 21, 22. Like this is the same exact conversation, only wrapped up in a different little bow and package. And so I think like that's what's so funny to me about this offseason. I think it just goes to show kind of like the full circle that this league does. It's just like, it just makes you think, like it just does. And I don't know where they go with it. I have no idea. I have no idea what way they're leaning. I wouldn't be able to say even if I did. So take that with a grain of salt too. But like I truly, again, it goes back to what I said off the top. Like whatever they decide to do is the marker for what the expectation of this team should be in 24.
Yeah. And Tori, and I think it also speaks to how important the quarterback position is in the league, because if you don't get it right, you're always looking. I was looking at the draft order. There are potentially 9 teams in the top 15 looking for looking at the quarterback position. So the Falcons aren't the only one. No. So if you don't get it right, you're going to be continuing to pick in that top 10 to 15. We know the Falcons have been set at 8 for a few years anyway. So I think this is something that they have to get it right. And I totally understand why they talk about the consistent urgency and the Falcons ethos. The ethos better match up with that quarterback position, being able to play some football. That's all I can say.
And if you go back to Tori's comment in terms of the symmetry piece, if you do go after Kirk Cousins and you get him, you still have to get it right, whether you go and get a quarterback in this draft or whether you wait next year to get a quarterback, because ultimately speaking, the other thing, Jarvis, that we saw in during last year or last season is how many QBs went down. And so you've got to make sure, we talk a lot about QB1, and don't get me wrong, we all know that QB1 is absolutely crucial, but how many times last year, and for the San Francisco 49ers, even the year before, QB2, QB3, and then QB4 became ever so important.
My thing too is that, like, I honestly at this point think that CJ Stroud is the exception to the rule, not the rule itself when it comes to rookie quarterbacks. And so I don't know. It's kind of like a bar. That's the thing is like evaluating quarterbacks is one of the toughest things to do, I think, across like the sports landscape, professional sports landscape. And so I'm just kind of like, anything you do is going to be a gamble. So you might as well like make a decision and like be firm in your decision to be like, we have conviction over this guy.
Yep. I say the same. To me, we talk about this on when we talk Braves, how, every year for them is literally World Series or bust. And to me, that statement also is AKA all in. Like, I say Falcons, go for it. Like, go all in. I mean, if you're going to go for broke, I mean, just go ahead and go for broke. Speaking of that, we'll talk about whether or not they might be interested, the Falcons, in going for broke and maybe getting some help. Send some help down 85 South. We'll talk about it and debate it in what's next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, I look outside and our weather is so crazy. It's up and down, up and down. One day it's beautiful. The next day it's dreary. One day it's hot. And the next day it's super cold. The reason I mention that is because there is such a thing as seasonal affective disorder, where all of these ebbs and flows of the weather actually impact our psyche. And so sometimes you need to talk to somebody about that. And that's where BetterHelp can come in. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small, or just reset. And that's what it can do. Now, therapy can be different for everyone. Some individuals may need to go a little bit deeper. Some just maybe need some coaching, but whatever you need, give BetterHelp a try and they can get you there. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, it's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suitable to your schedule. You can visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA, because you know what? It is only the beginning of March, so you can still talk about it, reset, and have yourself a great 2024 with BetterHelp. Guys, we got a little word earlier today that tagging Brian Burns definitely remains on the table, as does a tag and trade if it can be executed for the Panthers. But according to CBS Sports senior insider Josina Anderson, sources, long-term contract talks have actually been stalled. They're not in the scope of what the Panthers and Brian Burns want to do. So, Tori, I ask, is Brian Burns a guy that the Falcons should consider going after?
I mean, if he's there, I don't see why not. I mean, especially because just from my perspective, having been up there in Indy evaluating this draft class, I tend to think that the wide receiver class is a lot more deeper than the edge rusher class. So you're talking about, in order to get someone who you think could come in and be a game changer right away, I would rather spend a top draft pick, actually, which goes against everything that I've said for the last 3 years, but it's just because based on this draft class and the way that I look at it. Like, if you're going to spend draft capital, I would rather spend it on a receiver or multiple receivers and use free agency or a trade as a way to beef up your pass rush. That's just me personally. And so, I mean, it doesn't sound like a terrible idea. This guy has caused such havoc for this team in recent years. I mean, I remember we were talking about, like, when the Falcons were set to play Carolina this past year and Brian Burns was going through all of that contract dispute and everything like that. I remember, I can't remember which one of it was that we said it, but someone said, God, I hope I don't see him. I hope we don't see him. Like, and I remember that. And so, like, for that
and then
to
we
be,
saw it.
That's how you know a player has value.
Right. That's how you know.
On the field.
Like, I remember saying 2 years ago, like, there has to be someone on that defensive line of scrimmage that strikes fear into opposing offensive line and opposing quarterbacks. Brian Burns is kind of that guy. So if that's someone you feel convicted about, if that's someone you feel good about, and you feel like you need if you're willing to pay that kind of money for him, I think that's what it's all going to boil down to. They felt confident about paying that kind of money for someone like Jesse Bates. And they're so big about, like, character makeup and do they fit with the team and do they fit in the locker room? Like that, those are the questions that I do have. It's like, it's going to be expensive to go and get him, if you can even get him.
Yeah.
And does he fit? Does he fit what you want to do?
Yeah, I think that ticket is going to be pretty rich, because he turned down $27 million for over 5 years from the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers. There were teams that offered 2 first-round picks back in 2022 for Burns, so the value is definitely there. I just think that the man really want $30 million a year. It's just like, oh, that is a lot of strange. Oh my God! But yeah, I think it's a matter of, it's not the talent. Yeah, I think we've established that. I just think it's just, man,
$16 million.
You talk about,
well, 16 was where he was last year, so what he wants more of is too rich.
Yeah, I think it's, and when you think about just being all in, if they were to bring him in, and because I think the franchise number would be like 24 million, if I believe. If you talk about bringing him in for 27, 28 million dollars, or 29, or maybe even 30, that's all in. And that has to work.
That's your salary cap.
Yeah, that has to work for sure. Yeah.
Now, for me, I'm assuming that Carolina's going to tag him just because they've done all this thing of not trading when they had the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll answer phone calls if teams come calling, but I think when they see that 404 area code, if the Falcons come calling, they're like, the last thing we're going to do is trade him
Put
to
that on Do Not Disturb.
So as awesome as it is to fantasize about what Brian Burns could be in Atlanta, I don't think there's really any chance of that happening unless Carolina does the thing I think they did with Josh Norman like 8 years ago, where I guess
wow, what a throwback.
The GM didn't get along and they rescinded the tag, and then he went to Washington or whatever. So I guess we just have to wait and see if Dan Morgan, the new Panthers GM, and Brian Burns just start trading barbs in the media or something like that, and it gets personal, and then they're like, okay, we're just going to get rid of you. But I don't see that happening. So I think, as fun as it would be for Brian Burns to be in Atlanta, I don't think there's next to no chance he's going to be a Falcon.
Yeah.
Be a lot more production on that number 0 for sure. Somebody be giving up that number. That's where he wants to go.
Wherever he wants to go.
Well, if someone takes him out of the division, I'm not going to
at all. No qualms, like at all, because I can remember everybody in the press box when Brian, the days before when we found out Brian Burns was actually going to play, and then in the press box when he played, it was like, oh, damn. It was bad. Like, he shows you every bit of a reason why you would want to have a little, fantasy or daydream about him possibly lining up here in Atlanta. And listen, we just would be remiss without letting you guys know that we want to extend our thoughts and our prayers to family, friends, and so many other members of our media community, even here locally, who were impacted by the passing of Chris Mortensen. Of course, he's Emmy-winning ESPN NFL insider, but also formerly of the AJC many, many years ago, covered the Falcons. And because of that, Mr. Arthur Blank released a statement and said, quote, "I consider Chris a personal hero of mine, and it is truly hard to imagine sports journalism without him," close quote. Chris Mortensen, of course, passed away at 72. And again, our thoughts and prayers to all who were touched by him. He definitely set the bar quite high for us all. So listen, we appreciate you guys, as always, for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party. Thanks so much for that. And don't forget, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And you can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will see you tomorrow for the Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs edition.